The detention facility orbited the gas giant Kronos like a metallic tumor, its angular surfaces bristling with weapons arrays and communication towers. Within its sterile corridors, the Galactic Empire processed thousands of prisoners from dozens of conquered worlds, each species catalogued and contained according to their perceived threat level. Commander Vex of the Imperial Guard reviewed the latest batch of captives with typical bureaucratic indifference. His 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency across the holographic displays, sorting prisoners into categories: dangerous, moderate, negligible. The vast majority fell into the final category: broken remnants of civilizations that had dared to resist the Empire's expansion. Another human, his aide reported, mandibles clicking with mild interest. Captured during the reconnaissance raid on the Sol System's outer colonies. Vex's compound eyes focused on the prisoner data. The creature was bipedal, carbon-based, and laughably primitive. No natural weapons, no enhanced durability, no psychic abilities. The Empire's xenobiologists had classified humans as barely above the level of livestock. Their technology was crude, their military tactics predictable, and their physical capabilities unremarkable. Designation? Vex asked, already losing interest. Jake Miller, military rank unknown. He was found unconscious near a destroyed outpost on Titan Station. Probably just another grunt soldier. Jake Miller sat in his cell, back against the cold metal wall, watching. Always watching. The guards thought he was sulking or perhaps broken. By the shock of capture, they couldn't have been more wrong. In the 36 hours since his awakening, Jake had memorized every detail of his environment, the guard rotation schedules, the electronic lock sequences, the structural weaknesses in the corridor walls. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him that intelligence was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. While his captors saw a defeated primitive, Jake saw opportunity in every overlooked detail. The aliens' arrogance was their weakness. They had captured a human without truly understanding what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. The facility hummed with the efficient brutality of an empire that had conquered 300 worlds. Prisoners were processed, interrogated, and either executed or sent to labor camps on the outer rim. The system had worked flawlessly for over 2 centuries, crushing resistance before it could take root. Jake observed the other prisoners through his cell's force field, a reptilian species with scales that shifted color with emotion, insectoids, whose chittering suggested a complex language, and dozens of other alien forms. All of them shared the same defeated posture, the same hopeless acceptance of their fate. But Jake Miller was different. He had volunteered for the most dangerous missions in Earth's fledgling space navy, operations that required not just physical prowess but psychological resilience. He had been trained to survive in environments that would break lesser minds, to turn disadvantage into advantage, to find victory in the jaws of defeat. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-Fi Stellar Conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. The guards began their evening rounds, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with casual confidence. They had processed thousands of prisoners without incident. Their weapons were set to minimum power, their attention divided between duty and gossip about the upcoming invasion of Earth. Jake closed his eyes and regulated his breathing, slowing his heart rate until the biometric scanners would register him as either sleeping or unconscious. The guards passed without a second glance, their alien senses unable to detect the predator hiding in plain sight. In the darkness of his cell, Jake Miller smiled. The Galactic Empire had made a critical error in judgment. They had captured a human soldier, but they had no idea what that truly meant. They were about to learn that humans didn't just survive in hostile environments, they thrived in them. The first lesson would begin soon enough. Jake had identified 17 ways to kill a guard using only the materials in his cell. He had memorized the facility's layout from overheard conversations and glimpsed security displays. Most importantly, he had recognized the fundamental weakness. In the Empire's approach, they had grown complacent through centuries of easy victories. Tonight, that complacency would cost them dearly. The Empire was about to discover why humans had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain, and why they would do the same among the stars. The interrogation chamber reeked of fear and disinfectant, its walls lined with neural probes and pain amplifiers that had broken countless prisoners across the galaxy. Jake sat strapped to a chair that had been designed to restrain beings twice his size, the massive restraints loose around his comparatively small human frame. Interrogator Prime Keleth entered with the fluid grace of his species, his elongated limbs moving like liquid mercury. His people had evolved on a world where deception was an art form, making them ideal for extracting information from unwilling subjects. In 3 centuries of service, he had never met a mind he couldn't crack. "Human," Keleth began, his voice a melodic whisper that carried undertones of psychic compulsion. "You will tell me about your species' military capabilities." Jake met the alien's gaze without flinching. "Name, rank, serial number, that's all you get." The interrogator's features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Your neural patterns are fascinating. Such primitive organization, yet somehow resistant to basic psychic intrusion. No matter, we have other methods." The pain amplifiers activated, sending waves of agony through Jake's nervous system. Most species would have broken within minutes, their minds unable to process the artificial. Torture. Jake gritted his teeth and endured, drawing on techniques learned during SEER training that had prepared him for exactly this scenario. "Your homeworld has already been marked for conquest," Keleth continued, adjusting the torture devices with clinical precision. "The Empire's advance fleet is preparing to depart. We estimate your species will capitulate within days of our arrival." Jake's expression didn't change, but his mind raced. An advance fleet meant the main invasion force was still weeks away. If he could escape and warn Earth, humanity might have a chance to prepare proper defenses. "Your silence changes nothing," the interrogator said. "We have studied your species extensively. Bipedal mammals with no natural weapons, limited lifespans, and technology barely advanced enough for interplanetary travel. You are perhaps the most unremarkable species we have encountered." "Is that what you told the others?" Jake asked quietly. "Others?" "The 300 worlds you conquered. Did you underestimate all of them the same way?" Keleth's features darkened. "They were worthy opponents. The Nexari fought with plasma weapons that could melt starship hulls. The Vorthek possessed psychic abilities that could shatter minds across star systems. The Christian Empire had technology that bent space and time itself. And yet you beat them all. We are the Galactic Empire. We adapt, we overcome, we endure." Jake smiled, and for the first time, Keleth felt a flicker of unease. There was something predatory in the human's expression, something that triggered ancient survival instincts. "You know what humans are really good at?" Jake asked. "We're really good at being underestimated." The interrogation continued for hours, with Keleth growing increasingly frustrated by his subject's resistance. Human neural patterns were unlike anything in the Empire's databases, chaotic yet organized, primitive yet sophisticated. The species defied classification. Meanwhile, Jake absorbed every detail of the interrogation chamber. He noted the guard positions, the security protocols, the emergency exits. He observed how the aliens moved, their blind spots, their reaction times. Most importantly, he studied their psychology, cataloging their assumptions and prejudices. The Empire's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness: systematic dominance. They had developed protocols for conquering civilizations, but those protocols assumed predictable behavior patterns. Humans, Jake was beginning to understand, were anything but predictable. When the session finally ended, Jake was dragged back to his cell with theatrical brutality. The guards wanted other prisoners to witness his suffering, to reinforce the hopelessness of resistance. But Jake had learned more in those hours than his captors realized. He now knew the facility's layout, the guard rotations, and the location of the armory. He had identified the command center, the communication arrays, and the docking bays. Most importantly, he had confirmed that the Empire's forces were spread thin, their attention focused on the upcoming invasion rather than internal security. As night fell over the detention facility, Jake began his preparations. He had torn strips from his prison uniform to create makeshift weapons, fashioned lockpicks from debris, and memorized the guard patrol patterns down to the second. Everything he needed was already within reach. The Empire's own arrogance had provided the tools for their undoing. The other prisoners huddled in their cells, broken by years of captivity. They had forgotten what hope looked like, what resistance meant. But Jake Miller remembered. He carried with him the accumulated knowledge of humanity's greatest warriors, the hard-won wisdom of a species that had never known easy victory. Tomorrow, the Galactic Empire would learn their first lesson about humans. They were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The facility's artificial night cycle brought a false sense of security to the guards. Ambient lighting dimmed to conserve power, and the skeleton crew settled into their routine patrols. They had no reason to suspect that in Cell Block 7, a human was completing his final preparations for war. Jake had spent the day observing his guards with the patience of a hunter. Guard Captain Nix was ambitious but lazy, often cutting his rounds short to chat with subordinates. The insectoid sentries moved with mechanical precision, but had blind spots in their compound vision. The reptilian heavy guards were strong but slow, their cold-blooded metabolism making them sluggish in the facility's cooler nighttime temperatures. At 0200 hours, Jake put his plan into motion. The first guard never saw him coming. Jake had slipped the improvised lockpick into the cell's electronic system during the evening meal, creating a delayed override that would activate precisely when the patrol passed. The force field flickered and died just as Guard Nix approached. His attention focused on a datapad rather than his surroundings. Jake's hands moved with lethal precision. A cloth strip tightened around the alien's throat, cutting off his air supply and muffling any sound. Nix's forearms flailed desperately, but Jake had positioned himself in the guard's blind spot, using leverage and anatomy knowledge to maintain his advantage. Within seconds, the guard went limp. Jake dragged the body into his cell, stripping the alien of his weapons and access codes. The plasma pistol felt familiar in his hand's energy. Weapons weren't so different from the firearms he'd trained with on Earth. The next phase required psychological warfare. Jake had studied alien psychology during his brief time in captivity, noting how different species responded to fear and uncertainty. The Empire's forces were trained to fight organized resistance, not a single predator stalking through their midst. He moved through the facility's maintenance shafts, spaces designed for automated repair drones rather than living beings. His human flexibility allowed him to navigate passages that would have been impossible for the larger alien species. Every few minutes he would emerge to eliminate another guard, each death more mysterious than the last. The first body was discovered by an insectoid patrol team. Their chittering alarm calls echoed through the corridors, but Jake had already vanished back into the walls. Security protocols activated, but the Empire's procedures were designed for prisoner riots or external attacks, not a single infiltrator moving through their own infrastructure. Intruder alert, the facility's AI announced in a dozen languages. All personnel report to designated security positions. Jake smiled in the darkness. The lockdown was exactly what he'd hoped for. By consolidating their forces, the aliens had created predictable patterns he could exploit. Their military efficiency became a liability when facing an enemy who didn't follow conventional tactics. He struck again in the armory, where two guards were retrieving additional weapons. Jake's approach was silent, his movements refined by years of training in hostile environments. The first guard died before he could draw his weapon. The second managed to raise an alarm, but not escape Jake's improvised garrote. The facility's security chief, a massive creature called Warden Grok, studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. "How many intruders are we dealing with?" he demanded. "Scans show only one biological signature moving through the facility," his aide reported. "But that's impossible. A single prisoner couldn't." "Which prisoner?" Grok's voice carried the weight of dawning realization. "The human from Cell Block 7. But sir, humans are classified as minimal threat. Their species has no enhanced capabilities, no natural weapons." "No." A plasma bolt took out the main security console, plunging the command center into emergency lighting. Jake stood in the doorway, the stolen weapons in his hands trained on the alien command staff. His prison uniform was torn and bloody, but his eyes burned with the focused intensity of a predator who had found his prey. "Classification update," Jake said quietly. "Humans are an apex predator species. We spent 300,000 years fighting our way to the top of the food chain on one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy. We didn't develop natural weapons because we learned to make better ones. We didn't evolve enhanced durability because we learned to avoid getting hit in the first place." Warden Grok reached for his sidearm, but Jake's plasma bolt caught him center mass. The massive alien crumpled to the floor, his natural armor proving useless against military-grade energy weapons. "We're not the strongest species, or the fastest, or the smartest," Jake continued, advancing into the command center. "But we're the most adaptable. We survive in environments that would kill most other forms of life. We learn from our mistakes, and we never, ever give up." The remaining command staff tried to flee, but Jake had already sealed the exits. He moved through them with efficient brutality, each death a lesson in human lethality. These weren't random killings, they were precision strikes designed to cripple the facility's ability to function. Within minutes, the command center was under Jake's control. He accessed the facility's communication systems, downloading personnel files, security protocols, and most importantly, the invasion plans for Earth. The data crystal he'd taken from Warden Grok's body contained detailed information about the Empire's military capabilities and strategic objectives. As alarms continued to wail throughout the facility, Jake began the next phase of his plan. He wasn't just escaping, he was sending a message. The Galactic Empire had captured a human soldier, but they had unleashed something far more dangerous. A human warrior with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The real war was just beginning. The detention facility's central hub erupted into chaos as Jake's assault reached its crescendo. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the corridors, while automated systems struggled to contain what their programming couldn't comprehend. A single human turning their own infrastructure against them. Jake had seized control of the facility's security network, but he knew his advantage was temporary. The Empire's response protocols would eventually adapt to his tactics, and reinforcements were already en route from the nearby battlecruiser. He had perhaps 30 minutes before overwhelming force would make continued resistance impossible. Time to make those minutes count. "Attention all prisoners," Jake's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "This is Commander Jake Miller of the Soul Defense Force. The Empire has underestimated what it means to fight a human. Today, we show them their mistake." In the detention blocks, alien prisoners looked up from their despair with renewed hope. They had watched humans being brought in like cattle, had witnessed Jake's apparent defeat during interrogation. Now they heard something they'd forgotten existed: defiance. Jake activated the cell release protocols, opening every detention block simultaneously. Hundreds of prisoners from dozens of worlds poured into the corridors, their various species united by shared hatred of their captors. The facility's guards, already demoralized by Jake's rampage, found themselves facing a full-scale uprising. But Jake wasn't finished. He had studied the facility's schematics during his infiltration, identifying critical systems that could be turned into weapons. The atmospheric processors that maintained life support could be weaponized. The gravity generators that kept prisoners contained could be reversed. The energy conduits that powered the facility could be overloaded. "Computer," Jake commanded from the central control station, "initiate emergency evacuation of all Imperial personnel. Authorization required." The AI responded. Jake held up Warden Grok's severed hand to the biometric scanner. "Authorization granted." Klaxons wailed as the facility's own safety systems turned against its creators. Blast doors sealed Imperial personnel into secure areas while simultaneously releasing the most dangerous prisoners from maximum security. The automated defenses that had kept order for decades began targeting anyone wearing Imperial uniforms. In the chaos, Jake moved with deadly purpose. He wasn't just escaping, he was dismantling the Empire's entire operation in this sector. The facility's databases contained intelligence on military deployments, prisoner locations, and strategic objectives across dozens of star systems. He downloaded everything, preparing to broadcast it to every resistance cell in the galaxy. Major Vex, The commander who had initially processed Jake's capture found himself trapped in a sealed corridor with 24 of his best soldiers. They could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the facility, but their own security systems prevented them from joining the fight. How is this possible? Vex demanded of his tactical officer. One primitive human has brought down a facility that has operated for 2 centuries. Sir, I think we misunderstood something fundamental about their species, the officer replied. Our psychological profiles indicated humans were pack hunters who relied on group cooperation. We didn't account for what happens when you isolate an apex predator. Jake's voice crackled through the comm system. Major Vex, I know you're listening. You want to know what makes humans special? We don't just adapt to hostile environments, we thrive in them. Your empire conquers worlds through superior technology and numbers. But humans? We conquer through pure, stubborn refusal to die. The facility shuddered as Jake overloaded the main reactor. Not enough to destroy the station, he needed it functional for his escape, but sufficient to disable the primary weapon systems and create a diversion. The battle cruiser in orbit would be forced to choose between pursuing him and preventing the facility from falling into the asteroid field below Dot in the hangar bay. Jake commandeered a fast courier ship while freed prisoners fought desperate battles against the remaining guards. The vessel's controls were alien but intuitive, another testament to human adaptability. Within minutes, he had the ship powered up and ready for departure. As he prepared to launch, Jake activated the facility's final surprise. The maintenance drones, reprogrammed with new objectives, began dismantling critical systems throughout the station. The Empire's own automation was cannibalizing their infrastructure, turning their technological advantage into a liability. This is Jake Miller broadcasting on all frequencies, he announced as his ship cleared the hangar. The Galactic Empire has made a critical error. They assume that conquering our worlds means breaking our spirits. They believe that superior technology guarantees victory. They're wrong. The courier ship accelerated away from the facility, its small size and stolen authorization codes allowing it to slip past the battlecruiser's defenses. Behind him, the detention facility was tearing itself apart as its own systems ran amok. Humans don't fight like the other species you've conquered. Jake continued his broadcast. We don't surrender when outnumbered. We don't despair when outgunned. We get angry, we get creative, and we get even. The ship's navigation system showed a clear path to the hyperspace jump point, but Jake had one more message to deliver. He activated the facility's long-range communications array, preparing to beam his stolen intelligence data directly to Earth. To any human forces receiving this transmission, the Empire's advance fleet launches in 72 hours. They expect easy conquest, but they're about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's home. We've been preparing for this fight our entire evolutionary history. As the hyperspace drive engaged, Jake smiled grimly. The Galactic Empire had captured a human soldier, but they had unleashed something far more dangerous. Proof that humans couldn't be broken, couldn't be contained, and couldn't be conquered. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would be ready. The stolen courier ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its alien hull scarred from the escape, but its precious cargo intact. Jake's hands moved across the unfamiliar controls with practiced efficiency, broadcasting emergency codes on all human military frequencies. This is Commander Jake Miller, Sol Defense Force, requesting immediate priority contact with Fleet Command. I have critical intelligence on incoming Imperial forces. The response came within seconds. Earth's orbital defense network had been tracking the unidentified ship since its arrival, weapons locked and ready to fire. Jake's identification codes were 3 weeks old, but his biometric signature matched their records. Commander Miller, this is Admiral Chun aboard the battlecruiser Defiant. You've been listed as missing in action. Report your status immediately. Admiral, I've just escaped from an Imperial detention facility. The Empire's advance fleet launches in approximately 60 hours. I have complete intelligence on their force composition, tactical objectives, and strategic weaknesses. Permission to come aboard? The data transfer took 40 minutes. Jake stood in the Defiant's briefing room, still wearing his torn prison uniform, as Earth's senior military leadership absorbed the implications of his intelligence. The holographic displays showed Imperial fleet movements, weapon specifications, and detailed invasion plans. "Dear God," Admiral Cheen whispered. "They're planning to hit 12 worlds simultaneously. The scope of this operation. It's designed to prevent any coordinated resistance," Jake explained. "The Empire's standard strategy is overwhelming force applied rapidly. They've never faced a species that's already united and prepared for asymmetric warfare." General Hayes, head of Earth's ground forces, studied the tactical projections with growing concern. "Their numbers are staggering. We're looking at a 10-to-1 disadvantage in capital ships alone." "Numbers don't tell the whole story," Jake replied. "I've seen their forces in action. They're efficient, well-equipped, and experienced. But they're also predictable. They follow doctrines that have worked for centuries against species that fought conventional battles. And we're not conventional," Admiral Chun realized. Jake smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. "No, we're not. We're human." The intelligence Jake had stolen became the foundation for humanity's defense strategy. The Empire's own files revealed critical weaknesses in their technology, gaps in their tactics, and most importantly, the complete misunderstanding of human psychology and capabilities. Earth's military leaders worked around the clock to prepare for the invasion. The planet's entire industrial capacity was redirected toward weapon production, but not the weapons the Empire expected. Instead of building massive battleships to match Imperial forces, humanity focused on smaller, more agile vessels that could exploit the aliens' tactical blind spots. Jake's experience in the detention facility had revealed another crucial insight. The Empire's species fought as individuals or in rigid hierarchies. They couldn't conceive of the fluid, adaptive teamwork that characterized human military operations. This became the cornerstone of Earth's battle plan. When the Imperial advance fleet finally arrived, they found humanity ready and waiting. The battle for Earth's orbit lasted 18 hours, but it wasn't the overwhelming victory the Empire had anticipated. Human forces used hit-and-run tactics, sacrificial attacks, and psychological warfare to devastating effect. The turning point came when Jake, now commanding a fast attack squadron, led a desperate assault on the Empire's flagship. His ships were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with the ferocity of cornered predators. The aliens had never encountered warriors who would ram their vessels into enemy ships rather than surrender. "All units, this is Miller," Jake broadcast as his damaged fighter screamed toward the Imperial command ship. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our world. We're fighting for every species the Empire has conquered, every world they've enslaved, every civilization they've destroyed." The flagship's destruction sent shockwaves through the Imperial fleet. Their carefully planned invasion collapsed into chaos as human forces pressed their advantage. Within hours, the surviving aliens were retreating, their primitive enemies having handed them their first major defeat in over a century. But the victory was about more than military success. Jake's escape from the detention facility had become legend among the galaxy's oppressed peoples. The story spread through black market channels, resistance networks, and whispered conversations in a dozen languages. A single human had brought down an entire Imperial facility through sheer determination and adaptability. Months later, as Earth prepared for the inevitable return of Imperial forces, Jake stood in the same briefing room where he'd first delivered his intelligence. The walls now displayed reports from across the galaxy: slave revolts on Imperial worlds, resistance movements adopting human tactics, and most importantly, other species beginning to believe that the Empire could be defeated. The Empire made a critical error, Jake told the assembled officers. They assumed that humans were just another species to be conquered. They treated us like cattle, like resources to be harvested. They forgot that humans are apex predators, and apex predators don't just survive, they hunt. Admiral Chun nodded grimly. "The real war is just beginning." Jake smiled, but his eyes held the hard gleam of a warrior who had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger. "Let them come. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's home. We've been preparing for this fight our entire evolutionary history." The Galactic Empire had captured a human soldier, expecting to break another primitive species. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous, the realization that humans were not prey to be hunted, but predators to be feared. The galaxy would never be the same. In the darkness between stars, the real war was just beginning. And humanity was ready.